Klingon ma ta jaj. Heklume kak jajvam. Klingons, once the Federation's most lethal enemy. Today, they are our closest allies. Welcome to another episode in the Starfleet Academy Historical Weapons Series, designed to help you, Starfleet cadets, better understand the weapons of our allies and adversaries. Today, we will examine the small arms of the Klingon Empire, specifically the Pat Nijwi Gom, or PNG, the Klingon Modular Disruptor System. To understand Klingon weapons, you first have to understand Klingon culture and society. Unlike the Bavarian-style government of the United Federation of Planets, which monopolizes violence under a central national authority, the Klingon Empire is made up of 24 nominally sovereign great houses, which make up the Klingon High Council. Each house pledges their loyalty to a military dictator, known as a Kang. Though most often translated into Federation standard as Chancellor, this position is much more like the Shogun of ancient Earth's Japan. All Klingon ships, weapons, and military equipment are technically the private property of their respective houses, whose warrior families are expected to provide for a common defense of the Empire in exchange for their lands and titles. This is why you often see private Klingon citizens traveling the galaxy in warships with military-grade disruptors at their sides. In times of war, national crisis, or just regular security operations, Klingon houses are placed on mobilization orders by the Chancellor's government and are nationalized under the banner of the Klingon Defense Forces for a set period of time. This duty is considered highly desirable, as not only does it come with an increased chance for battle, but also an increased stipend from the Chancellor's government to help pay for expenses. Prior to the mid-23rd century, this unique feudal arrangement meant you saw a huge variety of Klingon ships, weapons, uniforms, and equipment, as each individual house often produced its own ships, vehicles, equipment, and even rations, though each house was the size and economy roughly equivalent to a country of pre-United Earth. Though this system was adequate enough to conquer individual worlds during the Empire's initial expansion across the Beta Quadrant, it broke down during the civil wars of the early 23rd century and subsequent Federation-Klingon War of 2256 to 2257. Klingon military planners found it almost impossible to account for combat power and provide logistics to multiple houses whose systems were not standardized and often not even compatible with each other. This meant individual houses often acted alone, assaulting planets, starships, and Federation bases with almost no coordination with adjacent forces. At the end of the war, the new Klingon Chancellor L'Rell instituted a series of radical reforms which are still felt throughout the Klingon Defense Forces today. Though she did not have the power to bring the sovereign house militaries under her direct authorities, she could incentivize standardizing military vessels, weapons, and equipment. She created vast factories and shipyards that produced standard-issue weapons and ships, such as the D-7 battlecruiser, and then sold them at volume, and therefore reduced cost, to the individual houses. She also provided additional stipends to houses who maintained their training and equipment to her government's standards, much like the old United States' National Guard. By the 2260s, the Klingon Defense Force was by and large flying the same ships, wearing the same uniforms, and using the same weapons. One of the most famous early examples is the Type 902 disruptor, nicknamed the Vishwi, or Whistler, for its distinct high-pitched report. The Vishwi is milled from a solid block of duranium. You can see that it is exceptionally well made, with a single hand grip into the receiver, as well as a large, very accurate emitter diode protected by these two duranium fins on either side. It also has a very large, easy-to-use optical sensor array on the top of the receiver. The Vishwi's controls are also extremely simple. You can see the selector safety switch as well as the trigger are actually located to the rear of the receiver instead of in the more traditional way that you would find in the UFP beneath the hand grip. This meant that you could operate the weapon with only a single thumb, leaving one hand completely free to utilize an edge weapon, most often the Doktog, or Klingon fighting knife that you see here. However, the biggest weakness of the Type 902 was the fact that it was so well made. The Type 902 was made to the same high standards as Klingon blades. Its receiver is machined out of that solid block of duranium, which made the weapon rugged but also very heavy. You can run it over with a tank and it will still work, but it also is extremely expensive to produce even at volume. Unlike the Federation, which was increasingly relying on industrial replication, the energy-poor Klingon Empire had to rely on traditional mining and energy production as well as factories to produce their equipment. By the late 2260s, there were serious concerns that equipping the entire Klingon Defense Force with the Type 902 hand disruptor and its larger cousin, the Type 902 disruptor rifle, could actually bankrupt some of the smaller houses of the Empire. The solution came from one of the most unexpected places, a former Klingon Kash Devui, or non-commissioned officer, named Mikhal, son of Khalash. Mikhal was a veteran of the Federation Wars and knew that the best military equipment was simple, rugged, reliable, and soldier-proof. This was especially true for equipment bound for the ground forces, which contained large numbers of Jegpui conscripts from conquered worlds. It took Mikhal nearly 20 years to refine his design at the Urska Defense Works, but by the 2280s, he had created a new lightweight disruptor. Instead of being machined from solid duranium, it was composed of stamped polycarbonate alloys. Its simplified emitter diode and power supply made it easy to use and maintain even for the most uneducated conscript. More importantly, these features also made the weapon extremely reliable, able to function from the searing heat and dust of Morska's deserts to the ice and snow of Rurapente. Lastly, in a genius stroke that could only come from an enlisted soldier, he made his disruptor system modular. A shoulder stock could be affixed to the hand disruptor unit, instantly turning a sidearm into a long rifle. This meant one small arm could fulfill two jobs, and essentially cut costs to the Klingon houses almost in half. Millions of PNGs were produced by Klingon factories and were stockpiled for a war with the Federation that ultimately never came. As a result, in the early 24th century, hundreds of thousands were sold as surplus or simply given away to fraternal peoples. Perhaps the most famous recipients were Bajoran resistance fighters, who received large amounts of PNGs as military aid after the Batreka Nebula incident between the Klingons and Cardassia. The Klingon PNG is an excellent weapon system. As you can see, just like on the Type 902 disruptor, the controls are located on the top of the grip rather than the front of the grip. The trigger is located here, and the safety selector switch is located here. Once again, they can be operated with only a single thumb to allow for the free hand to use the edge weapon. Once the shoulder stock is affixed, these fine controls come into play here, and the weapon system can be adjusted for operation in very fine increments, which is very unique for a disruptor weapon system of this type. In addition, because of the weapon's modularity, different upper receivers can be snapped on and off the weapon depending on the mission set, allowing for different accessories, including an advanced optical scope to be fitted for long-range accurate fires. Finally, one of the Klingon PNG's most unique features is actually its configuration. When the shoulder stock is affixed to the hand disruptor unit, the pre-fire chamber actually moves behind the main hand grip. This is what's known as a bullpup configuration. You can really see what we're talking about when you compare it to the Federation Standard Issue Type 3 Mark II above it, where the pre-fire chamber is in front of the main hand grip. The result is that you have a full-length weapon with a full sight radius. However, it is overall much shorter than a conventional rifle design. In fact, the Klingon PNG is over 15 centimeters shorter than its Federation counterpart. This makes it much easier to maneuver inside confined spaces such as starships, shuttlecraft, and armored vehicles. The Klingon PNG is perhaps the most recognizable small arm in the galaxy. It has equipped the Klingon Defense Force for well over a century. It has served in dozens of conflicts, including the Klingon Federation Cold War, Cardassian Border Wars, the Klingon Civil Wars of the 2360s, the Klingon Federation War of 2372 to 2373, and of course, the Dominion War. Its silhouette has also become well known as a weapon used by freedom fighters, criminal groups, and terrorists. To some, it is a symbol of oppression. To others, it is a symbol of hope and resistance. No matter how you see it, it is one of the weapons you are most likely to encounter as you head out into the stars. We'll see you next time.